We need more people. We need people to run these plants and to help.
Hey, Butthead, I thought Trump was supposed to stop migrants from coming in or something. No, dumbass. He was talking about aliens. You don't want aliens picking your crops and getting all that space juice all over your food. Well, I don't eat vegetables anyway, so I don't really care. Yeah, you do, dumbass. Where do you think your corn chips come from?
I was about to kick off with Beavis and Butthead, and I was all like, not being serious. All right, Trump Liberation Day. This is a piece by Scott. This is Beavis and Butthead special. He's got Mike Judge working for him, I guess. I don't know how he does
AI.
it.
It's not AI.
It's not AI. Yeah. And that's a very impressive point. And then we have What's Her Face, because there's a weather modification versus climate change argument going on in Canada. And then we have 50 seconds of CBS to tell you about Trump's tariffs. I'm just putting it in the time capsule because we're trying to just show you a pastiche, a mosaic of what's happened over the past week. So I want to make sure that at least the illusion of everyone panicking over Trump's tariffs gets in there, and that also messes with international relations, has other tumultuous effects. And then, yes, we'll come back and we can discuss how I learned about the deep state, which, you know, if you got 4 hours, I got you. If you want me to say it in like 30 seconds or 2 minutes, whew, I got to practice. Thank you for triggering my complexity. All right, so without further ado, we're going to get into this block with two guys I used to watch sitting on the couch all the time as I was sitting on the couch, you know, watching them. And they're called Beavis and Butthead, and they have a very special message about Trump's activities this past week on Liberation Day.
Hey, Beavis, the greatest president in the history of the United States is about to give a speech. I don't know, Butthead. He kind of sucks. Shut up, butt munch. We all know you just voted for Kamala because if Trump won, your mom's boyfriend would get deported. Shut up, Butthead. She was pretty smart. Yeah, I guess I'll give you that one, Beavis. She was quite the statesman, that Kamala. What's he gonna talk about? Apparently this is Liberation Day, where all of you liberals get flushed down the toilet for good, Beavis. Okay, shut up. Here he goes.
What a good-looking group of people. Well, we have some very, very good news today, and a lot of good things are happening for our country. Please sit down. But here are just a short list of some of the companies that have already announced and committed to investment in. Apple is going to spend $500 billion. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle, great companies, are investing $500 billion almost immediately. Johnson & Johnson, great company, $55 billion. Eli Lilly, $27 billion. Meta is investing $500 billion. Wow. And then you have Merck and Clarios,
Hey, Butthead. I thought all those companies sucked. No way, Beavis. Those companies used to suck, but now they're cool. If Trump says it, that means that's the way it is. Merck's Big Johnson is trying to make America, you know, make it do stuff.
We're going to get it down the right way. And we want people, by the way, to come into our country, but we want to come in through a legal process. We want them to come in legally. We need more people. We need people to run these plants and to help.
Hey, Butthead, I thought Trump was supposed to stop migrants from coming in or something. No, dumbass. He was talking about aliens. You don't want aliens picking your crops and getting all that space juice all over your food. Well, I don't eat vegetables anyway, so I don't really care. Yeah, you do, dumbass. Where do you think your corn chips come from? Oh, yeah. You think nachos were invented by aliens? Probably, Beavis.
Got them out in records. We have problems with judges that don't want them to go out. They want tren de raqua, and they want...
Tren de la raqua. Tren de la raqua. Tren de la raqua. Shut up, Beavis.
The auto workers and the Teamsters and the non-union people and everybody else. But we need people, and the farmers. And we're going to let...
Farmers suck. They waste all that time trying to get food out of the dirt, and they don't realize that food comes from Taco Bell.
Yeah. Why would you get all dirty trying to get food from the dirt when you can just go get some nachos?
Yeah.
It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, you heard the president, BEAVIS. Looks like you're going to have to go get a job.
No way, butthead. That would suck.
Yep. Time to stop living off the government's teats.
Damn it. Well, at least if I had a job, I'd have some money. And then we can get some chicks.
Oh, yeah. Hey, BEAVIS, you think if we got some jobs, we could get some chicks?
I don't know, butthead. Seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
If you're the type of nut job who correctly believes the government is controlling you by controlling the weather, then this next story's for you. Me and my family hunkered down on Saturday night to get some sleep, only to be kept up until the early hours of the morning with what sounded like bombs going off outside. All right, I don't know what bombs going off sounds like, but it was really loud. The sounds we heard were the trees on our property toppling over one by one, destroying everything in their path. Why? Because of an ice storm, one with an intensity that we haven't seen since the Great Ice Storm of 1998. Yeah, that's right. Here in Ontario, Canada, we just experienced a record-breaking ice storm just days after the beginning of spring. Huge, thick trees were completely uprooted from the weight of the ice. The trees littered our streets, landed on top of our houses and cars, and left 500,000 of us without power for up to a week. That's 3% of the total population of Ontario taken out in one fell swoop, no pun intended. This came after a highly unusual winter here in Ontario, where we endured the kind of constant, relentless snowfall we haven't experienced in decades. To put it in perspective, in the second week of February, we had more snowfall than the entirety of the 2024 winter season. Yeah, so what, right? Precipitation is unpredictable and changes from season to season. I agree with you. But with the fresh installation of Carney the Climate Clown and an election just weeks away, I couldn't help but be skeptical. I know that cloud seeding can increase snowfall, and I know that it can cause extreme weather events. So I began researching weather modification in Canada. And what I discovered turned my skepticism into full-blown disbelief. That discovery was a little-known experiment called the Alberta Hail Project, a research project conducted in Alberta, Canada from 1956 to 1985, sponsored by the Alberta Research Council and Environment Canada to study hailstorm physics and dynamics. Now here's where it gets interesting. The information gathered over the almost 30 years it ran was used to inform and design a program that still exists today called the Alberta Hail Suppression Project, a weather modification program that uses cloud seeding to reduce the severity of hailstorms in Alberta. And I'd say it's working really well, as just last year, a cloud-seeded hailstorm in Alberta turned out to be the second costliest disaster in Canadian history, resulting in $3 billion in damage.
I just called Colby butthead. All right, so we do have a clip that goes with these documents. But first, I wanted to get comments on what we just heard before we go into a longer answer than I had time for. I was already like, I'm doing audibles over here because I didn't plan on Scott and Teese to be here when I made the show card. I thought it was just me and Paul. So I had all these stories lined up and I'm going through. I'm like, we don't need that one. We don't need that one. And then I'm like setting up over here with Colby. And then you threw me like a curveball and I was like ready for the change up slow pitch. I don't know. I missed it. My bad. But what did you guys have to think about either the tariffs, which do affect y'all in Canada, or the weather modification, which Lisa was just watching. She couldn't believe all that damage is being done. And it's just coincidental that they're doing weather modification type stuff at the same time.
If I can chime in, just during the summer of the release of the COVID vaccine, BC, where I live, experienced both the hottest day on record, which was 45 degrees Celsius, which is about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. No, I'm just kidding. It's quite hot. We're talking like Saudi Arabia, Dubai hot. And then we simultaneously, a few months later, had an atmospheric river that flooded the entire Fraser Valley and destroyed just so much stuff all the way up the highway to the interior. And it was unprecedented, hadn't happened before. And you're kind of like, what is the cause of such a thing? Is it cow farts?
Is it cow farts? I don't think. Even if they bagged all the cow farts, I bet that stuff would still be going on.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to eat any bugs, so I'm gonna go with it's probably not the cow farts. But yeah, just that was a wild year, and it definitely makes you think, because there's still these satellite arrays up in Alaska, and BC is just like, we're like neighbors with Alaska. So if there's a possible testing area to try out these things, we've also had a few earthquakes already this year. But again, even if you see these patents that exist for these different kinds of weather weapons, they still maintain this plausible deniability to be like, hey man, it's just for science. Don't worry about it, bro.
Yeah,
That's a good point. That's a good point. I learned about HARP. I was director of sales for an artificial intelligence company at the job right before I was going through all this litigation, but after that situation, there was like a sales meeting, and it got passed to me in a meeting like that there's this thing. And I was like, no way. So then I was like at Barnes & Noble, and I'm pretty sure they had the book. They also had that David Icke book back in the day. And yeah, I didn't know what to make of it. The high altitude active auroral array, or whatever it's called, project. It's a bunch of antennas sending electricity up into the ionosphere in some sort of continuation of Nikola Tesla's research that's not really being explained to the public. And there's a lot of that occulted knowledge, I think, that plays into how they keep themselves in power. One of the ways they do it is by having overwhelming amounts of knowledge for you to have to sift through and deal with. But the weather modification in Canada, I had no idea. I know that they cloud seed here and that they fly patterns, and that I've seen people on Twitter, what they call X now, the young kids, where they'll track the planes flying back and forth, and they'll identify the pilots and tweet at the pilots, hey bro, why were you doing this zigzag pattern over the south of England, or wherever the thing is today that they were tracking? And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I should look up, because you get one of those apps and you can see what planes are flying overhead. So next time you notice such things. Also, Burmis did a piece this week. I don't know if he saw or tied into that other geoengineering story we just watched, but he had a bunch of footage that he had taken himself of them making crisscross patterns, and to some extent it could be like he lives in the middle of America and there's a lot of flyovers, right? On the other hand, when like it's happening consistently and it seems like they're making patterns and not flying, trips back and forth across America, I think there's obviously evidence that there's people who wish us harm, and that they've been putting a lot of money into those kind of black projects that they conduct, trying to block out the sun with particles in the sky and all that other Bill Gates type stuff that they deny. Didn't mean to rhyme, but
yeah, they deny it, but it's just the audacity of them thinking that they have the power to control, manipulate, change Mother Nature to such an extent. And it's so fascinating because, yes, we all know that are in this conversation, all of us that are in this conversation, we know we always get pushback. Oh, that's conspiracy theory. Oh, that's fake. Here in Tennessee, they passed a bill to ban geoengineering, and the people that were opposed to it were like trying to troll them by proposing alternative legislation like the anti-Bigfoot bill and things like that, portraying it as a complete conspiracy. I interviewed several of the people that were involved in that initiative to get the bills passed. And you refer to a story like this, which is literally, out of one side of their mouth, they're saying it's a conspiracy theory. Out of the other side of their mouth, it's like it's been around for 100 years. They're like, oh, well, geoengineering's been around for 100 years. This is my first time hearing about the Alberta Hail Project, ran from 1956 to 1985. But now this is, according to Rocky Mountain Outlook, they're saying that it's not only back now, but insurance companies are now footing the bill. So all the bills are now paid by the insurance companies. So insurance is backing this initiative to bring back this Alberta Hail Project. And right here, it said, right here. Cloud seeding is something that's been around for probably 100 years, said Paul Kovacs, executive director of the Institute of Catastrophic Loss Reduction. So insurance companies are well aware that cloud seeding is a thing, and they're implementing that technology to cover their losses, right? Because I'm sure they get impacted by large hailstorms. So it's just so fascinating that, again, we just get portrayed as crazy conspiracy theorists when it's like they're very blatant about saying, no, this has been around for a long time. We know all about it.
Why aren't the insurance companies investigating the weather modification since they have to take the biggest hits? Oh, because they pass it on to their customers and just make it kind of a premium update type thing, right? Because there's a lot of that problem in Florida with insurance companies not wanting to cover people because of the roofs damage with hurricanes. Same thing in California where they don't want to cover people because of risk of fire and the shingles are made out of petroleum.
Mark Carty advised on that.
Connie.
It's
Connie.
He advised on insurance in California and probably a lot of other places.
Got to beware of carnies and gypsies. That's wisdom right there. I think so. Or it might be like, I don't know, not acceptable language in some circles of wokeness, maybe.
Is that stack of papers your playbook for Cromwell and Sullivan? For dealing with them?
This is let me tilt it up because you're not even getting the full paginess because it was being cut off by the lower third. This is example of active literacy skills that they don't teach you in school. So I'm going to do it like this. First thing you got to do, because when you're going up against as a whistleblower, when you go up against a company that's a multi-billion-dollar company and you're trying to use the rules that they made to cheat against them, they don't like it. And it's hard to get attorneys to take that type of big risk. So first, you got to learn the federal rules, civil procedure to represent yourself in the courtroom, which I did. And I studiously studied because like being in court's like an exam, right? So it's like pass or fail, and we'll see. So let's go through because I'm looking for something specific, but it's in one of these. All right, what is this? Previously identified supplemental non-stipulated respondent exhibits. So these are exhibits from the other side for the court case, but that's not what I'm looking for. So the next thing you got are just like exhibits, which is a great big thick one like this. And you have to have a lot of exhibits in a case when you're going up against a multi-billion-dollar company. So EMC Corporation is now a company that you've never heard of called Dell EMC. And so that is not what I'm looking for because I'm looking for a transcript. What is this one? Well, this is more exhibits for the case from 2006, but that's not it either. Let's see. EMC's appendix submitted in connection with his post-hearing brief. No. Let's see. Exhibits. Complainant Richard Grove's addendum. So this is after the hearing, and I'm like, I went up and down the court with them. So I was like, look at how confident I am. I won. Look, boom. Look, here it all is. So if we went to the actual, there we go, transcript. This is volume 1. There's more in the other room, but it's a good, whatever, 4 or 5 inches thick. And volume 1, hearing transcript and exhibits. So this came out in February. My trial was in October of 2006. So it took a long time after trial just to get the transcript. So you know how long you have to like hold those notes in your head? Like, hey, they said this in trial and I want to respond like this afterwards. And then this document itself that I'm showing you, I had to pay $1,000 because the reporting company owns the rights to the transcript. So broke whistleblower trying to figure it out, representing himself in court, then had to like pony up for the transcripts. And then if we were to go to, there's 3 days of testimony in here, but if we go to day 3 of testimony, which was the third day, at the end of the third day, there's a page in here where I'm trying to put more evidence on the record, and the judge basically tells me straight out, like, you don't have to put any more evidence on the record. They're not contradicting you. And then the trial ends just like three pages later, right? Like, here's the end of the trial. But this is what he says right before the end. This is not straight. So let me try to help you out so you don't get vertigo. All right. So Sutton says, I mean, you've proved that. You've proved that because the other side hasn't offered any evidence to contradict any of that. And then I say, okay. And then he doesn't see the need. That's the next part. Let me get that on there. So I'm trying to introduce more evidence that would prove my case. And he's like, you don't have to. The other side hasn't proved their side, right? And I'm expressing my concerns. But that's the gist. You do a lot of preparation as a whistleblower that you shouldn't have to do because, you should have maybe a legal team there to help. All that preparation led up to a July 2000 decision that I lost. So despite a studious amount of work on my end, a copious amount of evidence on my side, when you play against a multi-billion-dollar company and a multi-billion-dollar law firm, it's a war of attrition. They offered to settle before I went to trial. They offered to settle. And I was like, no, dude, I'm here. I've prepared. I've studied for this test. I have the goods. I have the evidence. And that's why you want to settle before the trial. So I'm going to go in there, do my thing, testify, go cross-examination, try to object to your, I'm going to play the game. In order to win, we must learn to play their game. So in that situation, I didn't learn to play their game well enough. And I could have appealed and kept going back for years. But I think the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, it's an act brought through legislation in 2002 by a guy named Paul Sarbanes, a Rhodes Scholar. I didn't know that or its substantial nature and meaning at the time. They made this act so that they didn't have to have any more big financial scandals upending our economy. And as you know, after 2002, there were no more financial scandals upending our economy because the legislations did its job. So because of this, I as a citizen, I watch TV, and I knew that Anderson Consulting and Tyco International and Enron and these other companies were messing with our markets because they were fraudsters. And I was doing a job, and then I got a call to there's a company where I had some friends working, and they had just acquired another company that had a product that is now mandated by Congress that all publicly traded companies have to buy it. And I said, yes, please. Yeah, I'll take a New York territory for that. And I thought it was just going to be, there's a requirement. You guys have to buy this software. Here it is. And it was us and IBM. And I thought that was going to be a good, cushy, situation. Little did I know. It didn't take long to figure it out, but it did take a series of interactions for it to go through my thick skull. Little did I know that the software that we were selling to all these publicly traded companies, because we got to protect the stock market from fraud, everybody, okay? So this product that we were selling to make sure they couldn't delete accounting documents and do all this type of financial transactions had a back door in it so that those people who were supposed to preserve the transactions could actually delete them and make them look like they were never there. Now, that's not just my observation. I had Tyco International as one of my clients, and it was an early meeting in my career at that company. It was like July 2003. So it's like summertime. It's nice outside. I'm going to a big important meeting at Tyco International. They're on my client list. I think I'm going to go in there. They're under SEC and FBI investigation. I explained to their chief general counsel. Her last name was Baldessano. She had cooked the books, she said, at some other mergers to get that job. And I was explaining my sales pitch. I'm like, we're going to put this in. And then when the FBI and SEC need these documents, you're going to be able to push a button and deliver. Here's all the emails. She's like, I don't want this software. I want to know how to delete this information and make it look like it was never there. And then one of the tech guys from my company was like talking to their tech guy, like, yeah, we could talk about this, in the hallway or whatever. Because I was like a deer in the headlights. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I saw movies about corruption in New York City, but I think I just was in a meeting where I saw it for real. And that was something that raised a red flag, but I didn't know what it meant. And then next month, August of 2003, Lisa and I went down to one of my clients in Maryland. I had a big territory of financials. And we went to the National Association of Securities Dealers. We met with a guy last name Brady, and his assistant, Rippe, Rippe. Anyway, these nice fellows from the National Association of Securities Dealers, whom I'm trying to sell a large amount of software. That's why I drove down there, to be there in person. I'm not on the phone. I'm here in person in the offices. And they tell me across the table that there's a back door in the software, which kind of matches up with the Tyco International meeting. Now, I have a boss in that meeting, and I'm like, dude, what the heck? What are they talking about? What do you got me fronting for, right? A couple weeks later, September 2003, I got a call from a client at Northrop Grumman. And he says, why are there other people from your company calling and pushing me to do a purchase order on my personal credit card? I said, I have no idea, dude. But that's in my case because that was so they were setting me up, and they were saying they represented me to do this thing so they could fire me. So then I'm catching on to like there's a little retaliation going on, and eventually by the end of October 2003, I had to part of my job was not only selling the software, but I had to train these publicly traded companies on how their clients and like their employees could blow the whistle. So there's two laws. Sarbanes-Oxley 2002 and a SEC 17A4 law, protecting whistleblowers and protecting the audit trails of these documents that are essential to the security of our financial markets. For me, as a youngin', I thought that was a national security issue if you ever saw one. Doesn't have to come from the sky with Scud missiles and stuff like that. Like they attack your banking system, that's, that's a thing. So young and naive I was. Now I'm just old and naive. So, by October, I had to take the same system that I had to like rent a hotel ballroom, invite all the clients, come learn about Sarbanes-Oxley. Like I have the handouts from those meetings where it's like it was like a monopoly board, and it's like go to jail if you don't obey the new law. It was like really scary stuff. I didn't make it, but the company I worked for had that type of stuff. And so I found it ironic by October of 2003 that I had to call the SEC. The SEC was investigating a section of my company and involving some of my clients. And so I called the lawyer from SEC in San Francisco. His last name was Gross. And it was late October. And I said to him, hey, bro, I'm working at this company. I've seen these things. I know you're already investigating another section of the company. I don't know if these are related, but I have evidence of all the things I'm telling you of. I have legally recorded conversations of the executives admitting it clear as day. And he said, I really thought he was going to be like, bro, send me your information. We're going to hook you up. We're going to prosecute these guys. Thanks for catching them. We'll do the work from here. Right? Like it's a fucking Elliot Ness movie or some shit. And he said to me, we could put you in prison for trying to share that type of information outside the company. And I was like, dude, you work for the fucking SEC, bro. Like, what is going on here? Then I started to look critically at the company I was working for, which was a small company that got acquired by a larger company called EMC Corporation. And during that bidding process, EMC first offered Legato, my original employer in that situation, $700 million for the merger, and they said no. My boss came to me July, August, when all this stuff's going on in 2003, and they're asking me to artificially inflate my sales forecast. So when I know you're doing a merger and trying to get more valuation for your company, and you're asking me to be the liar in the spreadsheet to be like, hey, there's a bigger pipeline than what you guys thought, I thought that was unethical, and I didn't want to participate in that. I took a lot of heat for that. And I would email back like my boss to have an audit trail, and he would call me on something outside the audit trail. Like he'd be like calling me on my personal phone, not the business phone or whatever the thing was. And I thought that was a little weird too. So by the time you get to November 2003, when I blew the whistle it was November 4th, I had to make a decision. It's like I tried to go to the authorities, and there's no joy there. They're like, that's not going to be a thing. So I wrote to the General Counsel of Human Resources and the General Counsel of the Legal Department and the VP of Human Resources. So those are the two people as a whistleblower that you have to officially inform. So I have this whole November 4th email to the letter following the whistleblower process as dictated by Sarbanes-Oxley 2002. And I delivered that to the people who I thought were going to say, shame on you, Legato. You juiced an extra $1 billion out of us. We're not going through with the merger, and protect themselves from who I thought were predators. No. That's not how it goes, son. They bought that company because they were predators bigger than that predator. And they're like, oh, you got a little backdoor in your software? Bring that shit over here, bro. We have access to all these intelligence agencies and all this other stuff, right? So I proved later in court, took three years to get to court. And I proved in court that when I wrote the email on November 4th, 2003, those two gentlemen who make millions of dollars per year and by the Whistleblower Protection Act should have done prison time. They decided, they conspired amongst themselves to fire me without even looking at my evidence or being interested in what was going on. It was because I got them to testify in court. They brought their witnesses to testify against me, and I read the rules. And at the end of the first day of my trial, after I was done testifying, the judge says, Mr. Grove, you finished your testimony. Tomorrow, you'll, basically how I hear it, suffer cross-examination, right? Like they'll be ready for that. I said, actually, I have two witnesses to call. And then that's like record scratch for them because they were all set to go on the offensive. And judge is like, well, we don't have witnesses for you on the list. And I said, well, I didn't know I was going to have witnesses. And the judge is like, what? And I'm like, these two guys in the audience right here. It says here in the rules, if the opposing side brings witnesses and they're in the courtroom, I can call them as my witnesses. So I got them to go on the record and testify to the truth and the facts before they could go and do the thing to keep their job. So they would have had to, I would have impeached them for giving false testimony. So in that aspect, had I not read the rules so closely, like they were, even the judge was like, I'm not sure you could do that. I'm like, bro, here's chapter and verse. That is something that changed that whole week because when they came in, like Skadden Arps is a very large multinational, it's one of the biggest law firms in the world, and they defend the United States government and Iran-Contra and BCCI and a whole bunch of other nonsense. They rolled in on first off, I'm a large male. These guys were like 6'6" and 6'8". They were huge. They were like Wisconsin University tight end type, they were just huge dudes to intimidate me. I'm sure they have some shorter lawyers at that firm. They just found two guys that are like, who can go in and intimidate. And these guys come rolling in hand carts of banker boxes of evidence to use against me. But you won't find that evidence in the transcript because it's a whole bunch of smoke and mirrors to make you kind of scared to take that settlement at the beginning. There's a lot of psychological warfare. I also found out that my original employer, Legato, who was purchased by EMC, the CEO, I found was like a former NFL football player. And I'm like, good for him. He's the CEO of a publicly traded company. Nothing wrong with that. Lots of former NFL guys. Fran Tarkenton does Legal Shield. Very reputable company. But this guy, I did a little check. I called the place where he claimed to have a master's in business administration, MBA they call it out there. I called the registrar of the place that he claimed to have that, and he didn't have one. They never heard of him. I said, that's weird because on this SEC filing for publicly traded corporate paperwork, he lists that. I think it's a little unusual. Those are the things that the SEC was like, if you talk about that, you could go to prison because I guess they're in on that shit too, bro. So for me, learning about the deep state didn't just happen like when I heard about the HARP project or when I saw 9/11 or realized AIG and Kroll were somehow involved. I didn't know there was a deep state. I didn't know that there was like an infiltration of our intelligence community or any of that type of stuff back then. So it's like 9/11 happens, a bunch of my coworkers get blown up. There's some strange corporate connection with insider trading that goes back to these companies and the CIA. And then I learn about, I went through this experience, but during this experience, I learned about HARP. And then the first night of trial was a big breakthrough. I was trying to get my mind off this case. It was going to be a long week dealing with those billion-dollar law dudes. So I was reading this book, The House of Morgan by Ron Chernow. And Chernow in there, at the bottom of this right-hand page, at least in the hardcover, he says at that point, J.P. Morgan wanted to do hostile takeover work, and their white glove law firm of Davis, Polk, and Wardell, there it is, didn't want to do it. So what was JP Morgan going to do? Not do hostile takeover type of mergers and acquisitions? No. They went and found a law firm that'll do those things that the other guys are like, that's too dirty for us. And that law firm was called Skadden Arps, Marr, and Flom. Or at least what it was called. It was Skadden Arps and one other partner, but now it's like they added partners over the years. So when I read that, and then I was like, ding, ding, ding. Those are the guys I just was in court against all day. Like I've been arguing with them on paper for months now. And now I just found out like who the opposition is. I'm like, wow, respect. Geez. Okay. Let me search these guys. Oh, Iran-Contra. Like when the government gets in trouble and they need a law firm, they go to the guys that, represented EMC Corporation. Now, at the time also that made it really hard for me to get an attorney. The attorneys, like I called Jerry Spence. I called all the famous attorneys. I went to famous journalists like Lowell Bergman. But when they find out, like when you dig into this, who am I suing? Who founded EMC? Richard Egan, formerly ambassador to Ireland during the Bush administration when I'm doing this. He's an ambassador to another country. You know why? Because he's Cheney's largest fundraiser. He's a billionaire, tech magnate, who's all tied up with the deep state. And I knew none of this history when I got into that. I just thought what these guys are doing is wrong. I have evidence to prove it. And there's a law that protects me and my career. I never expected when I did this that I would lose a multi-million-dollar career, but I sure am glad I lost it, because what they have to offer, I don't need. I don't have a place for it. I don't want it. They can keep it, and they can rot in hell. No, I'm just kidding. I wish them the best, and I forgive them. They are what they are. They prefer to stay unfinished. I'm going to be the learner and continue to meet obstacles and challenges in front of me and outgrow the status quo. That all being said, I wouldn't recommend being a whistleblower. Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
talking about? Come on, man.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man.